All right, so Alibaba just open sourced over 100 AI models, and
Yeah.
well, is this a big deal or is this just like
Oh,
people
it's a big deal. It's
they talk?
definitely making waves. What's so interesting about this is that this isn't just like some, little startup. This is Alibaba.
Right.
They are huge, and this is a big deal for them to be like throwing open the doors to their AI development.
So like for someone like me who doesn't have like every tech company memorized, like what is it that makes Alibaba so important here?
Okay, so Alibaba, you can almost think of them like the Amazon of China,
Okay.
but in a lot of ways they're even bigger. Alibaba Cloud, their cloud computing is bigger than AWS in China.
Wow. Okay.
So they're the biggest player in that market. And they have the resources and the reach to really like shake things up when they do something like this.
Gotcha. So like when they make a move like this, people notice. We've actually got a ton of sources for this one company. Blog posts, news articles, like we pulled out all the stops for this one because we want to really get past the headlines and figure out like what this open source move actually means, for
Yeah.
them, for AI globally, for like, you know, our listeners.
Totally. And that's the thing that's most important here is understanding the why behind it.
Yeah.
Why are they doing this?
Yeah, exactly. So like first of all, open source, like in the simplest terms, what does that even mean in this context?
So basically, they're making the blueprints for their AI models
Mhm.
publicly available
Okay.
so that anyone can take them, use them, modify them, and even build upon them to make their own AI applications.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like giving away the recipe instead of, keeping it in the vault.
Okay, and like why would they do that? I mean, companies, especially huge companies like Alibaba, don't just like give away their, the
Right.
prized
Of
possession.
course not. There's always a strategy, and they're claiming it's about democratizing
Okay.
AI,
Yeah.
and, that might be part of it.
Yeah.
But there's also some, like, really smart business reasons why they might be doing this as well.
Okay, so let's unpack those. Like, what are they getting out of this?
Well, first of all, this is a really competitive field right now. You've got all these big tech companies, you've got startups all vying for this space.
Right.
And so by making their models open source, it's almost like they're trying to become the go-to platform
That's
for
scary.
AI development because the more that people are using their models, the more that everyone has to come to them
Interesting.
to play in that space.
So it's less about giving away the farm and it's more about strategically planting seeds that,
Exactly.
yeah.
And the seeds that they're planting are pretty powerful.
Okay.
You look at something like their Quen 2.5 model family,
Okay.
and you've got different sizes, different languages, that it supports tons of potential applications.
So like real world
Oh,
application?
absolutely. And people are using it.
Okay.
I mean, one of the articles mentioned that they've already had over 40 million downloads of their Quinn series.
Wow.
And they're claiming something like 50,000 derivative models have been built on Hugging Face alone.
Wow. 50,000? That's not just like people
Yeah.
tinkering in their basement. Like that's
It's huge.
that's a lot of people using this stuff.
Yeah, and that's huge because open source really thrives when you have this kind of engagement
Oh.
because you have all these developers that are tinkering and making it better,
Yeah.
which means that it's going to improve faster than Alibaba could ever do on their own.
Right.
So it's this like self-perpetuating cycle of improvement that's fueled by the community.
Okay, so there's a method to the madness, but like at the end of the day, there's still a business.
Yeah.
So how does this translate into, dollars for them?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting because while they're doing this, they're also investing very heavily in their infrastructure,
Okay.
the hardware and the software.
Yeah, and I saw a couple of articles talking about like CHB, EC 5.0, and like Open Lake. And I'm like, I'm
Right.
sure that makes sense to somebody,
It
but
sounds like a good time, but I don't.
it does sound like a good time, but I don't necessarily know what that means.
Basically, imagine that they're giving away the blueprints to the house, but they're also making sure that you have all of the best tools and materials to build that house.
Okay.
And guess what? They're also selling those tools and materials.
Oh, so they're creating the demand and then they're supplying the solution.
Exactly.
Very smart.
Yeah, so you've got CUBE DC 5.0, which is like their next generation data center architecture.
Okay.
So like a super powerful engine for running these applications.
Gotcha.
And then you've got Open Lake, which is all about making the data more accessible and more usable.
So they're the one-stop shop for all things AI.
Yeah, they're trying to be.
But then if they're giving away the blueprints, why would anybody pay for their like premium offerings?
That's a great question. And that's where we get into the nuance because they're playing both sides of this.
Okay.
They're trying to cater to the open source community who values having access to this information.
Yeah.
But then also businesses that have very specific needs who need these more advanced, cutting-edge proprietary solutions.
So like a restaurant with a regular menu and then like a super
Yeah.
high-end tasting menu.
Yeah. And to really understand this, we have to look at these proprietary models and how they play into all of this.
All right, so let's do it. Let's talk proprietary models. What are some of the things that they have that are really turning heads? All right, so let's do it. Let's talk proprietary models. What are some of the things that they have that are really turning heads?
Well, they've got a few.
Yeah.
One that I think is really interesting is Quen Max. This is like their flagship model.
Yeah.
You know, this is the one that they want to go head-to-head with the best of the best in terms of like raw power and performance.
So if the other ones are like the crowd pleasers, this is like their heavy hitter.
Exactly. And then there's Tongyi Wangxiang, which is just cool.
Okay.
It's a text-to-video model. So you give it a text prompt and it spits out a video.
Wait, hold on. AI that can just make videos from scratch.
Yeah.
That sounds like something out of like a movie.
It's pretty wild. And we're not just talking about like basic videos. It can do different styles, like 3D animation.
Okay. And like where do you even begin to use something like that?
Oh, man. The possibilities are pretty much endless.
Yeah.
Imagine you're a company and you need to make marketing materials, educational content, even animated films.
Yeah.
You could do all of that with just a few lines of text.
Okay, so that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So they're doing both. They're offering these open source tools, but then they've also got like the really next level stuff for people who, want to pay for it.
Yeah.
But like, how does this all fit in with like the global AI landscape? Because this isn't just about Alibaba taking over China, right?
Oh, absolutely not. This is way bigger than that.
Yeah.
One of the articles we have actually mentioned this open letter
Okay.
that Meta and a bunch of other big tech companies signed calling for clearer regulations in the EU.
Interesting.
Because their argument is that if you have all these really strict rules, it's going to stifle innovation.
Okay, so how does that tie back into Alibaba?
So this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because if the EU ends up favoring open models, which makes sense, they're all about transparency and access,
Right.
Alibaba's in a really good spot.
Yeah. Because they're already doing it.
Exactly, because then they become the obvious choice for companies who want to operate within those regulations.
So they're playing the long game here.
Oh, yeah. They're thinking way ahead.
Okay, but what about all those like little AI companies that are popping up?
You're right, because it's not all about the big guys. And this is another area where Alibaba's strategy is really smart. There's this whole trend of like niche AI assistants that are emerging. So these are AIs that are tailored for very specific tasks or industries.
Like that CRA thing we were talking about that helps people navigate that like Web3 gaming platform or whatever.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
It's not trying to be everything to everyone. It's just really good at this one specific thing. And that's where Alibaba's open source models and their infrastructure come in. Because they're providing the building blocks for other companies and developers
Gotcha.
to create these really specialized AI tools.
So instead of having like one AI to rule them all, it's going to be like a whole bunch of little AIs that are all powered by Alibaba.
Like the Intel inside of AI.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? Because things are changing so fast that it's impossible for one company to be an expert in everything.
Right.
So by giving other people the tools, Alibaba gets to be a part of all these different applications.
This is all super fascinating from like a tech perspective, but how does this impact like, the average person?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the truth is, it already is.
Okay.
I mean, AI is everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not some far-off thing anymore. Think about it.
It's true. I feel like I talk to those chatbots like every day now.
Exactly. Those customer service chatbots, a lot of them are powered by AI.
And they're getting good, like scarily good.
I know, right? Or think about those recommendation algorithms on Netflix or Spotify.
Okay, yeah.
All powered by AI.
So even if we don't realize it, we're already like knee-deep in this stuff.
We are, and companies like Alibaba are the ones who are shaping how that's going to look in the future.
So we're living in this AI-powered world, whether we realize it or not, but like where do we go from here? Are other companies going to follow their lead with this whole open source AI thing?
That is the question, isn't it? It's like we're watching the first domino fall. Will the rest of them follow suit? I mean, it all comes down to whether or not Alibaba can make this dual strategy actually work. Can they get the open source community on board, but also convince businesses to buy into these like premium models that they have.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to be the friendly neighborhood baker, giving away sourdough starter, but then also running a Michelin star restaurant at the same time.
That's a really good analogy
Right.
because it really highlights the challenge for they need to build trust with both of those groups. They have
Totally.
to cultivate that open source collaboration, but
Hmm.
then also navigate this really complex world of AI regulation.
Right, because that's not going away.
No, it's not going anywhere.
So let's say they do pull it off. Let's say everybody sees Alibaba killing it and they're like, we got to get on that open source train. How does that change things?
I mean, it could completely change the game.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where all of the best AI tools aren't locked up by these huge tech companies, but they're available for anyone to use to build on top of. It would be like the difference between a world where like only a handful of people had access to the printing press
Yeah.
and then everybody being able to print whatever they wanted.
It's both really exciting and also kind of terrifying at the same time,
A
right?
little bit, yeah.
Like what happens when anybody with an internet connection can just get their hands on like really sophisticated AI
Well,
tools?
and that's why we need to be having these conversations now.
Right.
Because it's not just about the technology, it's about what we do with it.
Exactly. So for everybody listening who's been on this journey with us today, learning about Alibaba and open source and specialized AI assistants,
Right.
like what's the one thing that you would want them to take away from this whole conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that we are at a really crucial turning point right now. The decisions that companies like Alibaba are making today are going to have a huge impact on all of our lives down the road. So like stay informed, ask questions, and remember that the future of AI isn't something that just happens to us. We all have a say in it.
So well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. We've gone deep into Alibaba's AI strategy, peeked into the future of this crazy technology, and hopefully given you a lot to think about. So until next time, keep learning, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.